Good afternoon and welcome. For those of you that haven't seen me before, my name is Ben Church. I am actually a geologist, so I study all of the sciences, put them together to arrive at an understanding of the way the Earth works. But today, tomorrow, and for the talk that I'm doing the day after the Azores, I'm taking my geology hat off and I'm putting my more adventurous hat on. In a different life, I worked on oil rigs for a few years, and then I was a teacher for 26 years. And subsequent to that, I have led whistle-stop bus tours around Ireland, Scotland, England, and also Iceland, my favourite, with American high school kids, and I also lead adventure travel expeditions. So I've been very lucky in that I've had the time, because of the working on the rigs and the teaching, to do a lot of travelling and have a lot of adventures. The whole premise for this presentation is that people generally don't want to hear the story about you when you go on a trip and everything went according to plan, because that's not very exciting and it's not very amusing. Whereas if you go on a trip and things don't go quite according to plan, they're the things that people always want to talk to you about when you get back, and hence the title, When the Going Gets Tough, It Makes a Good Bar Story. So these are the stories that I would tell you in the pub. So strap yourself in, it's going to be a bumpy ride, a roller coaster of adrenaline and laughter-fueled adventures all over the world, romping through some of the highs and lows of my adventures. This is the sort of the first half, if you like. I've still got lots left. So, less fat, more hair. So, at the tender age of 18, when I'd finished my A-levels, I did a sponsored bike ride from John O'Groats to Land's End, 1,200 miles. Fantastic ride. I bought a bigger bowl on the second day because you needed to really put the fuel in on that ride. And I must admit that by the time I'd finished it, I thought, I don't really need to travel abroad. The amount of diversity, the range of scenery, the characters of people, the architecture, the food, the quality of the beer throughout Britain is amazing. But as it happens, I did travel a great deal later. So I did mention beer, but also cider. We stayed on one night on a cider farm, and this was the result next thing in the morning. Note the rather large black coffee in the foreground. Now, I did mention that I'm a geologist, and having done that bike ride in the summer, in the autumn, I went to Birmingham University to do a geology degree. And as part of that geology degree, after my second year, I had to do a geological mapping project. So this involved studying the rocks of an area and recording all of the geology and interpreting it as a field geologist. And I chose to do my geology mapping project on the Isle of Skye, an absolutely wonderful place, which I was lucky enough to revisit again a couple of times, actually, in the last 2 years. So I mapped an area of 25 square kilometres, and up there it's pretty rugged scenery, and most of the rocks that are exposed tend to be in stream sections, which posed a little bit of a problem, because the midges on the Isle of Skye are probably the worst bitey things I have found anywhere in the world. If anyone tries to tell you that small things aren't important, try spending a night in a tent with one of these little fellas. However, midges were not the only problem. I introduced to you the sheep tick. Now, these sheep ticks were rife on the Isle of Skye, and we were battling our way through the heather all day, every day, and came across quite a lot of these things. And I distinctly remember this very gruff warden from the youth hostel, who was a Glaswegian from Gorbals. So he was quite a hard guy, but he was sat on the stairs of the youth hostel, and his wife was extracting one of these, and he was whimpering like a baby. Now, I have had experience of these, not on Skye as it happens, but in Snowdonia. And I managed to acquire one of these in a rather delicate place. I got one in my belly button, which is not a great place to get one, because they're really difficult to get out. And it actually happened twice. So now Callie has told me that I can't go to Snowdonia unless I gaffer tape my belly button. I have got another bug story from Belize, but Callie says I can't tell it in public. So if you've got a strong stomach, ask me around the ship, but don't ask me anywhere near mealtime. Um, anyway, after doing my geology degree, I worked on oil rigs for 3 years, as I mentioned in my talk yesterday, the Memories of a Mudlogger talk. And because at the time I didn't have a house, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a girlfriend, I managed to save a bit of money. So I went off backpacking 6 months. Fantastic trip. Set off on Valentine's Day 1988. So I did a month in Nepal, a month in India, and then 4 months going across Africa. So in Nepal, one of the big attractions for me as an outdoorsy person was going trekking. So went trekking up in the Langtang Valley, which is right up near the Tibetan border. And I was heading for Yala Peak, which you can just see in the background on the left-hand side there, about 5,700 metres. But didn't quite make it. The discretion was the better part of valour. The snow just got too deep, and I turned back. Another big attraction in Nepal was whitewater rafting. This is on the Trasuli River. The chap on the left there is an Austrian guy called Reinhardt. And he goes, "Oh, yes, my name is Reinhardt. I'm from Austria. I'm a champion paddler." And the next second, he fell in. So he was an absolute hoot. And everywhere we went, he goes, "I think here there may be snakes." The joke being, there are no snakes in Nepal. But it was a marvellous trip, and in the evenings we just camp up on the beaches, and a little bit of geology for you here. When you're looking at the Himalayas, there's lots of rocks that contain a lot of a flaky little mineral called mica. And if you think of glitter, right, this is a bit like silver glitter. These beaches were made of that, silver glitter, so sparkling in the moonlight. Absolutely fantastic. And then towards the end of my time in Nepal, I went to Chitwan National Park and gave an elephant a bath, which was great fun, but you did have to jump off very quickly when she decided to roll over. And then it was off into India, where we went on a golf course with no grass, which was quite interesting. Got templed out, or more temples than you can throw a stick at, and a great deal of Indian innovation. Might take you a moment to notice, this guy on a bike is cycling with one leg. Incredible. They're just so industrious, so inventive. And their modes of transport were quite incredible. So you get these really well-decorated trucks, often massively overloaded with 2 or even 3 times what they should be carrying. And we saw several instances where they'd simply toppled over. And I love this one of the tuk-tuk with its load of people. I don't know what kind of party they were going off to, but I love the fact that they've got a little curly shoe on the number plate there. Speaking of tuk-tuks, I visited Udaipur. Now, 5 years earlier, James Bond had been there, and they'd filmed the movie Octopussy with Roger Moore. And I can tell you that every single tuk-tuk driver in Udaipur thinks they're in a James Bond movie. I feared for my life. So, having spent a month going around India, it was off to Africa, a continent which I really love. And one of the things that I did there was climb this mountain, Kilimanjaro. So I climbed there April, May sort of time, 1988. So 5,895 metres, and I got a foretaste of what it was going to be like when I was older up there, because you literally walk about, I don't know, 30, 40 feet, and then you've got to stop for a breath. The wisdom is that when you're trekking at altitude, and I've taken quite a few groups up to over 5,000 metres, and you can get the effects of altitude certainly anywhere over 3.5, 4, varies for different people. But my measure is, if you can't carry on a conversation with the person that you're walking next to, you're going too fast. And that's even if you are basically shuffling along. So when you're going up Kilimanjaro, all of the local guides will go poli, poli, which is the Swahili for slowly, slowly. So, yeah, made it to the top. I mean, I was with a group of people. There were actually 18 of us, and it was only me and the other guy there, JK, Kiwi John. We were the only people that actually made it to the top. But quite an adventure. And then I did it again in 2014, and that was with a bunch of teenagers, more of which after the Azores, when I do a talk then about where the magic happens. But it was interesting to go up there then, managed to get their female member of staff to the top with a double hip replacement. So, it can be done. A very determined woman. There was one student who didn't make it to the top, but we did a big debrief and made it into a learning experience, and the outcome was basically the journey's more important than the destination. So travelling across Africa, loads of fantastic wildlife, visiting the Serengeti, visiting this place, which is the Ngorongoro crater, and was lucky enough there to see 19 lions in just one day. Absolutely wonderful. And then going across the Serengeti, you get loads of these, what are called kopjes, which is where you get some weathered boulders of rock just sticking out above the plains. So we set up camp amongst this big herd of wildebeest, and the next morning when we drove round to the other side of this pile of rocks, a couple of lions just sat there. Just focused the mind a little. I really love collecting signs wherever I go. You see some with hilarious spelling mistakes and so on, but the ones in Africa have the most fantastic drawings. So this was a hairdresser's where you could go and you could get styles such as the Raz or the Peak. Coincidentally, only a few days after this, we were near Mwanza on the south shore of Lake Victoria. And the truck that I was travelling in, which is a big Army Bedford Blitz, broke down. And we were all kicking our heels while we were getting this fixed. And it transpired that one of the girls on the trip was actually a hairdresser. Now, wherever we went, everybody stared at us, the Mzungus, the white guys and girls. So we thought, to hell with it. So this girl Space, the Australian hairdresser, gave us all a mohawk. Which was quite amusing. Now, you might say, oh, well, where's yours? Oh, don't trust me, I got mine. I got mine in the end. So we were having a good laugh as well as having great adventures. Now, subsequent to this, we visited Rwanda, and this was before all of the atrocities there, but a fantastic country, where I was blessed to have the opportunity to go and visit the silverback mountain gorillas. So that's me on the left there. So trekking through the jungle and getting up there, these incredible creatures. And just by a quirk of fate, an opportunity arose for me to go again the next day, which I just jumped at. And I'm a big believer in getting the opportunities while you can. But so we were trekking through the jungle for quite a while before we actually found a little family group. And we were sat there crouched down in the bamboo watching this fellow. Now, he's a big boy. His head is probably twice the size of mine. Absolutely enormous. And he was maybe, 2.5, 3 meters away from me. And he's a bamboo eating machine. He's munching away on the bamboo. And then he looks over at the guide as though to go, yeah, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. And he pushed the guide. And this guide was just looked down, didn't look, and we were all going, oh my God, and it all calmed down. And then it started raining. Well, thought it had started raining, but actually, I am one of the few people in this world that can honestly say that they've been weed on by a baby silverback mountain gorilla who was up above us. So, yes, strange but true. Now, when we were travelling, as I mentioned, just about anywhere we went, we'd gather a crowd because we were unusual, and because we were travelling on this big old Army Bedford Blitz, we were off the beaten track very often. We weren't doing the main routes. So when we stopped for lunch, and we'd put the chairs out, and you'd have an instant crowd wherever you went. And it was great going through some of the more remote villages. I mentioned the great inventiveness of the Indians. It's there in Africa as well. Check out this guy on his little chopper. If you look closely, you'll see it's actually got front suspension made out of car inner tubes. And these weren't just toys. They used them for carrying huge bundles of firewood as well. Now, there was one time, and we couldn't really find a decent campsite that night, so we basically parked up on the road. And we had a little frame tent that we used as the cook tent. And we'd had our meal, and really good goat curry, as I remember, and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was woken by the most blood-curdling screams. Went in, bashed on into I was sleeping under the trailer, went into the cook tent. What's going on? Well, the girls that were sleeping in the cook tent, it was like something out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. Somebody had forgotten to move the bucket of goat bones out of the cook tent. And these ants had smelt that, and they had come in to get those bones. And that involved crawling over sleeping people in the thing. And they had them in their hair and everything. And these critters can bite. I mean, the locals historically used to use them. They'd pinch the heads and use the jaws as natural stitches. So you really don't want to get bitten by one of those. One of the biggest adventures during this expedition was going through Zaire, what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the wet season, which may seem like not a great plan, but it added to the adventure. So on the day that we actually crossed the equator, we found this bridge down where, unfortunately, 2 trucks had tried to cross it at the same time. And this led to a whole day of diversion, trying to figure out a dirt track route to go around it. And the quality of the roads deteriorated. I mean, here you've got a bridge and there's actually tarmac on the road. Most of the time it was like this. And we came across trucks that had been stuck, not for hours, not for days, but for a couple of weeks. We did have 4-wheel drive, we did have a big rope, and we did have a lot of bodies to pull the truck through. Some of the mud bogs were very big and very deep, quite an adventure. So on my 24th birthday, I spent the day rebuilding bridges. So you'd come across a bridge like this and have to gather bits of wood and line the truck up, and then you'd manually pull the trailer across just to get across the bridge. Now, throughout the trip, I'm a very keen photographer, and I was taking photographers as I went. I'm an opportunistic travel photographer, so while, yes, I do sometimes love to take a landscape and have my tripod and wait for the golden hour and all of that, very often I can't do that, particularly when I'm leading with other groups. I've just got to take the chances while I can. So it's always sort of on the hoof, and you'll find out that's much the same approach that I take when I'm caving as well. I don't get all of my colleagues to stand around and shiver while I'm trying to get the light right. But with that opportunistic style of photography, I get some pretty good images over the years. And I try not to be too intrusive. I try not to be invasive with my camera, sticking my camera in people's faces and so on. And it really makes me sad when I see this happening, particularly in the more exotic and remote destinations. I think a really good example of knowing when to leave your camera, not every moment is a Kodak moment, was just after my birthday, actually. We'd all eaten, we'd camped, and we were absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And just after we'd finished eating, I think we'd maybe had a beer, I heard this drumming in the distance. So me and a couple of mates thought, oh, sounds interesting, go and investigate. So we trekked off through the bush. It got louder and louder, got there, and we're sort of peering through the gloom, and we can see that there's a big blazing fire and lots of people chatting and dancing, and 3 guys on the drums really giving it some. And we were spotted, and they said, oh, come. And I didn't speak the local language, none of my friends did, they didn't speak our language, but we all spoke the international language of nod and smile. And this can get you a very long way. And where it got us on this evening was it got us to join in on their Friday night knees up. And we danced for hours, and we were, my cheeks fair ached with grinning, as they say in Norfolk. We had a wonderful time. Not a single photograph. It would have just spoilt the moment. So I would encourage you sometimes to think, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't a Kodak moment. This is something where it's going to be kept up here. But without that, I mean, I would have remembered it anyway, but a couple of days later, we were passing a dusty old market, and I came across this image, and it's a batik, and it cost me about, I don't know, £1.50 or something. Brilliant, because they're hard to break, light, compact, ideal souvenir, and I don't buy many. For me, it's mostly photos. But I took this home and I had it stretched across a wooden frame and I have it on the wall. And I think, for me, it just conjures up that night. The energy of it is just superb. So, finally, we got all the way across the Democratic Republic of Congo, across Zaire, and we ended up in Bangui in Central Africa, Central African Republic. It had been a long journey, and we all needed a break. We were a bit fed up because we'd had to resort to some of the dehydrated food, which sometimes you'd be better off eating the packet, frankly. It's improved a lot since then. But we arrived in Bangui, and we decided we were going to have a Mozzie Net party. So I'm there with JK and Aussie John there. And we were there, and I went up to the bar, and I was having a chat with Dave and Terry. And Terry goes, "Oh, I'm rooted. I'm going to go back to the tent." 5 minutes later, he comes roaring back to the bar. And he goes, "Dave, you mongrel, what have you done here? Put stuff in my sleeping bag." And he goes, "No, I never. Anyway, we go back. So I went with them back to the tent, try and calm things down a bit. Got back to the tent. Chuck had laid a second egg in it. So, strange but true. And we had the egg for breakfast as well, which was rather good. So while we were there, we were holed up for a few days, relaxing and swimming and stuff. And I made a schoolboy error. I dived into the Congo River, still had my money belt on, so I had to dry out all my money. And because I used to work on the rigs, I travelled a lot. I had one of those really fat, the 100-page old black British passports. Took a while to dry out. Raised a few eyebrows in customs. Finally, we reached the west coast of Africa. So we'd gone right the way across from east to west. We were in Cameroon and then on into Nigeria. And this was in the Yankari Game Reserve, where somebody spotted these elephants. Oh, great. We stopped, and people were all getting their cameras out and everything. And then I noticed that the behaviour of these elephants is telling you something. They have all got, or many of them, particularly the males, have got their trunks up. And then in about the next second, the biggest one started running towards the truck because inadvertently we had stopped and split the herd. And they weren't happy about that, so we made a sharp exit. But elephants were the least of our worries. Far worse than that. Baboons. I'm not a big fan of baboons. They are the worst kind of thief. And here you can see in the distance, baboon. And slightly closer, Wayne, who is the driver. Wayne is carrying a spade. And he is chasing the baboon who's nicked his bag of sweets out of the cab. So after all of that hot and wet in Zaire, we get into hot and dry. We're crossing the Sahara Desert. And you can see how the roads deteriorated from a tiny bit of rubbish road to basically no road at all. Most of the desert is not huge, grand rolling sand dunes. Most desert, as I mentioned in yesterday's talk about when I was working in the Syrian desert, is flat and stony. There were supposed to be barrels with a stick in every kilometre. There weren't. But we basically did a bit of a dot-to-dot and got through. It was incredibly hot. In Algeria, it was about 46, something like that. So you'd wet a piece of cloth and just put it over your face, just in an effort to cool down with the latent heat of evaporation. As the water evaporates, it cools you down. The journey took its toll on the truck, so here's me fixing a flat, yet another one. The holy piece of metal you can see above my head is a mud mat. So when we were in Zaire, you put this down one way, and it would help for the truck to get a grip going through the mud. And if you turn it up the other way, it becomes a sand mat, which we did have to use on a number of occasions going through the Sahara in the sandier sections. Now, while we made it, you do, when you're crossing the Sahara, see quite a few vehicles that haven't made it. And when you find these vehicles, you find that there is nothing left on them. They have been completely stripped of anything useful. But while we thought Algeria was hot, oh my goodness, when we got into Insalar, it was nudging 50 degrees. It's the hottest place I have ever been. And it was just the kind of heat you get when you open an oven, completely dry heat. Finally, we made it up into Morocco and enjoyed one of my favourite pastimes of aimless wandering. So wandering around markets and souks, a truly wonderful occupation. And for me as a photographer, lots of opportunities there. Also visited some of the sites as well. So I don't know if any of you have been to Morocco, you might have seen these, which are the dye pits. They've been there since the 11th century, believe it or not, and they smell bad. Why? Well, you've got thousands of animal skins, but the solution that they use when they're tanning them, when they're processing them, includes cow wee. So that's why it smells so bad. Finally, after 6 months of travel, I arrived back in the UK and had the obligatory fish and chips. And then I went off to do my teacher training in Newcastle. I can still hear the dulcet tones of the little kid at the back of the class going, "Well, mum, it wasn't me, sir. It wasn't me." But moved on from that and managed to get a job teaching in Monmouth in the Welsh borders. And as a reward to myself, after my first very tiring term of teaching, went skiing in Val d'Isere, and on Christmas Day I had Angel's outfit, wings, halo, everything, and we were jumping moguls. And I jumped one mogul too many, and I landed and I heard a crack. And it was a rib, but there was nothing you could do apart from take paracetamol and carry on, really. I've had a couple of rib injuries over the years, but yeah, nothing too serious. So that was after my first term. After the first couple of years, I thought, I need to get travelling again. I'm itchy feet. So I went on a backpacking trip from Bangkok to Bali. And great trip to do. Obviously, if you're going away for sort of 6 weeks, I flew out on the last day of term and came back just before term started at the end of the summer. You need a fair bit of stuff. So I had a fully packed rucksack, which Aeroflot lost. And I spent about a week trying to get my rucksack back, went into the lost luggage in Bangkok airport. I kid you not, it's like walking into a warehouse, floor to ceiling, with rucksacks and loads of walking boots, walking poles, sleeping bags, roll mats, all the kind of things which people who don't know any better have tried to tie onto the outside of a rucksack. So don't do that, ever. Anyway, I didn't get it back. Well, I did get it back. I got it back 6 weeks later, 6 days after I got back to the UK. But it was a great lesson in travelling light. You really don't need to take very much. So I thoroughly enjoyed going trekking in the jungle, with a few encounters with leeches. Lots of people will tell you, oh yeah, you get them with a cigarette lighter or you squirt some insect repellent on them or anything. Don't do that. If you do that, they'll throw up into you and you can get nasty disease. The best thing is to get a credit card and just scrape it off. That'll get it to release nice and quickly. So, a few little incidences with leeches, and then continuing the trekking, some very makeshift camping arrangements. So here we were in the Taman Negara National Park in Malaysia. And the morning after we'd camped at this campsite, look what we found, only about 10 metres away. Tiger footprints. Coming back into the UK, I did a few charity events. So this one was for cystic fibrosis, raised quite a few £100 with this, doing a tandem free-fall parachute jump from 13,000 feet. So great fun. And another sort of airborne exercise, I'd earned some money by taking people caving and climbing the previous weekend. And my mate Johnny, who features in tomorrow's talk actually, he gave us a call and he said, what do you want to do this weekend? And I said, oh, well, I don't know, I've just got some money. What do you fancy? Oh, I've always fancied this paragliding malarkey. And he goes, yeah, all right, let's do that. So we went off, and I thought I was just going to get my bum dragged through the thistles. But actually, we did get quite a few flights in, just near Leominster here. That's me with the pink helmet there. So, yeah, got in the air and everything. Johnny did manage to land in a tree, but that's another story. I mentioned I was a teacher, and I was in one geography lesson, and they were doing some atlas work, and I was just, and I thought, ooh, there's a nice line, coast to coast along the Pyrenees. I'm going to do that, and I did. So I set off with my mountain bike, and the target was, right, can I go coast to coast along the highest route of the Pyrenees? Now, there is actually a walking route. I think it's called the GR10. And I started on that, but on the first day, I found that I'd been carrying my bike for about an hour, and I thought, right, I'm not having this. This is stupid. So I decided that I'd change the goalpost slightly, that I was going to do the highest road route that you could do, but I would do some off-road every day to just scratch that itch. And that's what I did. And it was superb. Some of the limestone gorges, though, at the bottom, it was like preparing for battle, because the limestone is quite pale coloured, so it really reflects the sunlight. So you'd be slapping on all of this sun cream and then getting your shades on and stacking up the water and trogging up the hill. And you might be going uphill for 2 hours. But oh my goodness, once you got to the top, those hairpin descents, it was like glazed eyes, locked elbows, white knuckles, fixed grin, terminal velocity. Absolutely fantastic. And at the end of this trip, I got back to the UK and I thought, well, a friend of mine was going to meet me. And I said, well, there's no point in you coming all the way over to Dover. I'll tell you what, I'll cycle to Tunbridge Wells. I'll meet you there. I was pretty fit because I'd just been cycling through the Pyrenees. Anyway, I arrived there and we'd agreed we'll meet you at the Barclays Bank, and if there isn't a Barclays, perhaps the NatWest. Anyway, I was cycling around looking for the bank, turned the corner, and this is what I saw. That's my car. That's my friend leaning against a pillar box. Thankfully, she was fine, and so was the other driver. My car, not fine. Had to get on the back of an AA vehicle to get towed home. A great adventure one February half term was up in Scotland in the Cairngorm. I went on a trip with one of my caving buddies, and we were going winter mountaineering with Mick Teague mountain guys. Now Mick Teague, he did 7 winters in Arctic Norway with the Marines, so he knew what he was doing and he did not suffer fools gladly. And we also had a guy along with us called Victor Saunders, who was an aspirant leader, he wanted to get his international mountaineering qualification, and his next big expedition was climbing K2, and he later summited Everest loads of times. But we still threw snowballs at him. But doing this winter mountaineering, physically, I'd say one of the hardest challenges I ever did. So after 3 days of my third day of wearing crampons, we walked in at dawn to what you can see on the left there, which is the northeast buttress of Ben Nevis, and climbed it. And it was hard. It was very, very hard. So when you're going up here, you've got your 2 axes and you've got your crampons and you're front pointing. So you're kicking so that the spikes on the front of your boots, the crampons, are getting embedded in the ice there. And if you're a beginner like me, you want to make really sure that they're going to stay in. So you kick pretty hard. Now, I borrowed a pair of plastic boots that didn't quite fit. And unfortunately, about 2 weeks later, I ended up losing both my big toenails, which wasn't very pleasant. But it was kind of worth it. Walking down in that sunset was superb. Another sponsored event that I did was the 3 Peaks. So that's doing Snowdon, Scafell and Ben Nevis in 24 hours. It's a really good challenge. Did it there with my mate Adrian and his dad, which was lovely. And that was another event that raised several £100 for charity. Then shortly after this, my mate Adrian announced that he was getting married. And by way of celebration, we loved going climbing in Snowdonia, so we went up to Snowdonia. This is the ridge that leads up to the top of Snowdon. It's called Crib Goch. And we were both pretty fit at the time. We were doing a lot of climbing, and we were having races to see who could run the fastest along Crib Goch. But the wedding came, and of course they had to have a stag do, so we went Canadian canoeing down the River Wye, and then at the end of the canoe race, we attached this lead ball and chain to him. Now, that is not just a steel ball and chain, it's a lead ball and chain. It takes 2 hands to lift it. But we had a great time. There was a little festival going on in town, and we had his face all painted up. Went back to the local pub, and there was a big motorcycle rally there, loads of big hairy bikers there, and they were lovely. They helped him celebrate. So it was all good fun. And as my partner in crime in a lifelong search for adrenaline and the perfect pint, we'd keep coming up with these ideas of fun things to do. This was one of them. This was abseiling down a waterfall in the Cliddich Gorge. And I later discovered that this sport is called canyoning. And on a trip to France, we did quite a lot of it. Absolutely superb. This is a canyon called Écouges 2 in the Vercors. And it's a bit like cabriolet caving. It's like caving with the roof off. So you've got the benefit of it's light, but you are still sliding down, jumping off, and abseiling down waterfalls. And when we got to this point, one of the guys looked round the corner and went, whoa. Another one, oh. And they looked at me and said, what we need now is a climber. And they looked at me. And this was, to me, already a familiar situation, as you'll find out in tomorrow's talk. What was there was a 70-metre pitch. So that means a 70-metre drop down a skinny waterfall. So I had to gingerly go around the corner and sort the ropes out, rig the ropes, and start abseiling down. Now, I got to just about level with where the red circle is. You can see somebody abseiling there. And you can see there's a little line of green. Well, I got down to there, and I was looking because there was supposed to be another place to attach the rope, and I couldn't see it because of all the spray of the water. And I belayed, which meant I tied on to a thing about, I don't know, thinner than my wrist, a little twig, really. Anyway, there was nothing else to do, so the guys came down, by which time I'd spotted where the re-belay was, and I had to gingerly traverse, go sideways to this thing, along a ledge which was about 6 inches across at 45 degrees and covered in wet algae. So I was going across like this. And then when I got to that chain, it was like, oh my God. I know my heart was going like this. So I rigged it all. And I was so focused and so like, yeah, I did it, that I forgot to rig the upper line so that the other guy could get there. So he had to do the same thing as me. But then off we went down the abseil. Absolutely wonderful. So this is back in Snowdonia, one of my favourite mountains. This is a mountain called Tryfan. And there's a superb route if you go up the north side of it. I don't think I've ever done it exactly the same way twice. You can just make it up as you go along. You can make it as easy or as hard as you want. And I'm usually taking people up there who haven't been there before. And indeed, I remember many years ago taking a group of school teachers. My friend Adrian had arranged a trip to Snowdonia as a sort of staff jolly. And it was February half term. There was plenty of snow around. Many of them had never been up a mountain, let alone in the snow. So we roped them all up and we took them up this mountain, and they thought it was fantastic. Really wonderful mountain. I also did a winter trip, again in a February half term with a friend of mine, and on the side of the mountain you can see some big grooves, and in the winter they're full of snow and ice, so climbing up those we were leading out. I mean, usually you will put in protection to stop you falling. Yeah, it depends on the severity of the route, but you'd normally be putting it in every few metres. But there was one section where we had to do a run out, which means you're going without protection for a good 20, 25 metres. But it was all good fun. We got up onto the ridge, gained the ridge, got to the summit, went down into the col, the wind gap between the two peaks behind it. And then our intention was to climb another ridge, the other side of it. But climbed up this ridge, and the weather started coming in. And we were equipped. We'd got sleeping bags, we'd got all the right gear, but we were thinking, this doesn't look too great. Then the rope froze in place, so I had to climb up and free the rope. And we thought, no, that's it. Time to call it a day. So we basically crawled backwards down a mountain in the dark. But you know, we survived. We knew that we would have been fine if we'd had to overnight, and we'd certainly worked up an appetite and a thirst by the time we got to the pub. On the top of this mountain, Snowdon, you can just about see in the red circle there's two rocks that stick up, and these are known as Adam and Eve. And it's a special mountain, and I went up there and I proposed. It turned out this was a bad mistake. I should have known when she was very late, and I noticed that the scouts were abseiling down the church tower, and I said to my mate, make it so, and he goes, no. I go, no, I'm going to do it. So off I went, abseiled down the church tower. There was a ban at the wedding on fleece. I was told, no, you can't have any fleece. But there was a loophole, which meant that I could get all of my mates to pose with wellies, the footwear of the future. So, a lot of people ask me, they say, Ben, do you still do all this mad stuff? Hell yeah. Oh yeah. So, next year, I will be travelling around French Polynesia. I'll be travelling around New Zealand with my gorgeous girlfriend, Callie. I'm leading some tours with American high school kids in Ireland, Scotland and Iceland. I'm doing some 4 caving instruction courses in South Wales, going on a caving expedition in France, going on an expedition in Borneo. And if you want an example of just how crazy my life has become, the virtue of being self-employed and seeing opportunities in crisis and being prepared to grab those opportunities is an example of the level of planning and brinksmanship that I have to go to. So, earlier this year, May, I'd run a training weekend for a group of students that I was taking on expedition, and this training weekend took place in the Peak District. At the end of the expedition, I handed the teachers that were going to come on the expedition a fully packed expedition rucksack. Fast forward, this was in May, so early May actually. Fast forward now to the 7th of July. I just finished doing 2 weeks of back-to-back tours in Iceland. It's midnight, so 00:30 hours. I'm at Reykjavik Airport. I board a plane and I fly to Dusseldorf. I have to wait for an hour or two. Then I board another plane and I go to Birmingham Airport. I get in a taxi and I go to Warsaw. At Warsaw, I put down my tiny little Iceland suitcase, I pick up my expedition rucksack, I get the group of students and the teachers, put them on a coach, go down to Heathrow, board a plane, fly to Bangkok, fly to Hanoi, start a 28-week-day expedition in Laos, Vietnam and Cambodia. That's my life and I love it. Doesn't pay very well, but I am cash poor, life rich. So it doesn't really matter how you travel. It's the journey which is important, not the destination. So do enjoy the journey. Now, I don't think I told you how that very first story ended about the cycling the length of Britain. Didn't tell you how it ended. Please turn away if you're easily offended. Yep, that's me in the glasses. So, when the going gets tough, yes, it does make a good bar story. And I'm still making memories, and every now and again I'm lucky enough to have that little bit of extra magic that makes it into a legend of a day. So, a few sort of takeaways. I would say that the best bar stories are the result of opportunities that arise from crisis, when things don't quite go according to plan. And you're not old until you start acting old. I've still got loads more bar stories, and the bar stories that some of you have been telling me, oh my goodness, you've got some great, great stories. And remember that with these bar stories, the subtitle of my book is The Extraordinary Adventures of an Ordinary Man. I'm nothing special. Anybody can go away and have great adventures. So, my next talk will be looking at the great indoors. I have a great passion for caving. I'm a bit of a womble. So you've seen some of the shenanigans that I get up to overground. So tomorrow you can see the malarkey I engage in underground. If you want to think, perhaps you live in Derbyshire, Yorkshire, the Mendips, South Wales, Ireland, or you've visited those areas, all areas with caves. Perhaps you wondered what those strange people with lamps on their heads are doing when they're going underground. Well, this is your chance to find out why on earth people go caving. Plenty of awe and wonder, beautiful caves, beautiful cave formations, lots of adrenaline, lots of excitement, and a fair dose of humour as well. The following day, I will be, that's tomorrow. Yeah, and then the following one I'm going to be doing is a sort of a follow-on from When the Going Gets Tough, It Makes a Good Bar Story, really. It's kind of what happened next. It's all about sharing my experience of helping, in particular, young people to safely enjoy their own adventures. But the big message is that where the magic happens, which is outside your comfort zone, that approach to personal development can be done for everybody, whatever kind of travels they're engaged in. I did mention my book, so there you go. when the going gets tough, it makes a good bar story. I hope you've enjoyed the talk. If you do have any questions, I'll be at the back of the theatre at the end to take questions. So it just leaves me to thank the tech team and to thank you for coming. Thank you.